Hey, it's Chris. I love board games and I love talking to you. Today, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know in a series of condensed 5 points about the upcoming, the just on crowdfunding Slash and Spells from Burning Forge Games. What do you need to know, whether or not it's right for you, to help you decide and to get a better knowledge of everything that goes along with this thing. Let's do this. Obviously, you're interested in this game. Let me tell you right from the get-go as point number 1, when I was reading through the rulebook, when I was looking at this game as an asymmetric character, power building, progression leveling-ish, Basham style game, it reminded me, and follow me for a second here, of Dice Throne. Now you're going to go, Chris, this game doesn't have any dice. And I will go, oh, yeah, that's right. But I'm telling you that because it gives me similar vibes of using these abilities, upgrading your characters, and using them to knock out your opponent faster than they can knock you out. Only it's adding a 3D element to it that you're having to navigate along with that. And along with that comes risk, reward, benefit, drawback, positioning, respawning. Now, again, part of the greatness of Dice Throne, right, is the ability to get it to the table. And full disclaimer, I'm not a huge fan of Dice Throne. It lacks the it factor for me. I love the idea of it up in my head, right? I'm a huge fan of King of Tokyo. I'm a huge fan of dice chucking in general, but something about it, the randomness is just a little bit too random for me. And it's more Yahtzee and less fun for me, for some reason. And so this game is a slight departure in it from that aspect, obviously with the no dice aspect, but more so in the sense that you have a hand of cards instead that you're using, right? The reason it reminds me also very akin to Dice Throne is because once you get the core element of the play style, it's very quick, it's very low overhead in terms of explanation, and the meat of it is in the game itself, rather than the slog of trying to learn the rules to even get it to the table in the first place. And isn't that why people love Dice Throne? They say, I can take this out with anybody. I can play this anywhere with anyone, with a 6-year-old, an 80-year-old, and everything in between, right? And now, this is slightly different, of course, and this leads me into point number 2, but the mitigation, the control of this is very unique in its asymmetry, right? You have these asymmetric characters with the same set of 6 actions that are selected for them or available for them on every single turn. And then you have the same 3 characteristics that you're going to be able to upgrade depending on how you pick up these little cubes called relics off of the board, right? That's all very overlapping. But the asymmetry, the abilities, how they use those individual statistics to upgrade, and the statistics themselves that are either unique to them like poison or armor or, you know, flame are what sets them apart. And it's very akin to Dice Throne as well because they rank them in terms of complexity, right? 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. So you can get a sense of how complex of a character do I want to do, akin to something like, again, Dice Throne or Spirit Island, where you can tailor it a little bit to that aspect. Now, this copy of the game came with 6 characters, so I don't know what the final product is going to look like, if they're going to have expansions or additional unlocks or exclusives or anything like that. But I'll tell you right now, they recommend, in terms of the asymmetry, 2 characters to start off with, and I was like, you know what, I'll do it, okay, sure. And it was a little ho-hum, to be frank. I felt it was very, okay, this character does this character does this. I mean, but then I got past those guys and I looked at the other 4 and I messed around with the other 4 characters. And I said, okay, you got me here. You got me with the Ice Mage. You got me with the Flame Elementalist. You got me with the 2 others, including the Druid who can shape change. And the giant Iron Golem-esque guy, right? And they're doing something more unique with those. And they're different. And they manipulate the field. They allow you to summon other creatures to the field to act as your proxies. They give you more elements of that. And that's the blessing curse of a prototype, right? Is that sometimes you have to distill it down to get the core essence of the game but it doesn't capture the true nature and spirit of it by the sheer fact that you have to make sure it's accessible in the first point. And that was an interesting dichotomy with this game, and I want to be very clear that it is more than meets the eye just with these basic two characters of the paladin and the assassin that I did. Now, I'll throw this in there right now. Again, balancing is one thing I will throw right out here as point number 3. The balancing of this game has to be optimal, because games like this are won or lost not in terms of the field of play, but the field of play, right? I've seen a lot of critiques with some of the other games like this. The other big one that came out on crowdfunding, I think in the last year or two, that Tom Vassell really didn't like was called Ignite. And some of the same criticisms, you know, like, you got to make sure this is more Spirit Island-esque in terms of the fine-tuning. For example, almost all of the powers that is on these cards, these asymmetric cards, which are great, mind you, in terms of some of the abilities on the text in the bottom of the cards, and we'll talk about that in a second as point 4, but they are all pretty much 3 or 4 power that I looked through and that I played with. And so that doesn't leave a whole lot of variety, right? And that is, in and of itself, what these games really are necessitating. I look back at the one that was sort of both panned and enjoyed by a lot of people was Senjutsu. It took a lot of criticism and a lot of flack, but it also took a lot of, wow, this looks like it could be really good. But you have to make sure the balance is there. And again, playing a prototype, completely fine with that. You've shown me what you can do. Now make me now show me that you can perfect it. And if you can do that, especially at some of those more asymmetric, different aspects of characters, that's exciting. Now, let's talk about point number 4 here for a second. Let's talk about those cards. The cards themselves are very interesting. I haven't really seen this mechanic done much elsewhere. I've seen it in 1 or 2 other variations or variants. If you think of BattleCon, if you're familiar with BattleCon at all, where you've got this perfect information and you play your 2 cards and then it goes to one pile and then it goes to another pile and then it goes back into your hand. Similar aspect here, done in a different way. You play these cards for the attack and it tells you the range. But instead of discarding them after you play them, you slide them under your board. And then it gets moved all the way down to the right as far as it can. And there are 3 slots, battle tactic slots, I think they're called. And when you fill up all 3 of those slots, when you slide a new one under, it pushes the furthest one out. And then those 6 actions that I was mentioning that you're accessible, that are utilizable on a turn-by-turn basis when you only have 2 actions per round that you're playing, they are then accessible the bottom half of the card where the super interesting ability is that you can utilize it. And so not only do you have to choose the priority in which you want to get those down there, but you also have to choose the order in which you're putting them down there, so the one that you want to actually play stays down there long enough that you can utilize it to its full extent. Because otherwise it's going to get pushed out too quickly and you're not going to be able to take full advantage of it, especially if you want to use it more than once, which is at times difficult because those cards are your main way of attacking when you're setting them down using the top half of them in the first place. And so you could play 2 or even sometimes rarely 3 in a turn, but you may swipe out all the other cards that are on that line in the meantime. So it's an interesting, very delicious balance of how, when, and timing. The 5th point is one I am undecided on yet. I don't know how I feel about it after several plays. Scattered throughout the board, on the beginning of the game, you place down enemy tokens. Mystery enemy tokens that when someone is moving there or is pushed there in any way, you flip them over and you are afflicted with a curse, a penalty, until you defeat that enemy. But if someone else defeats that enemy, then you don't lose the curse ever. The curse stays with you until the end of the game. Consequently, there are 2 other things on the board. Barricade tokens, essentially, and obstacle tokens. Both activate when someone in that area takes damage. The barricade tokens reduce the damage to your character, so they're essentially positive. So you want to go in those areas potentially to sit in there and you can help fend off attacks. And in the obstacle, in the outer portion, the outer hexes, if you will, there are the obstacles where if you're hit in that area, you flip them over and it does that much extra damage to you. You know, extra collateral damage, essentially, to you. And I don't know how I feel about that, because that can swing things a little strongly. Now, they are removed from the board after one hit, after one event happens. But I just don't know how I feel about them. They add another element of things where I worry about it almost making it slightly too complex or slightly more random than you may want. It makes it slightly more unpredictable, which, again, depending on how you feel about that, may be a good thing with the nuances that are there with the battle tactics cards. But you may also not like it because it then can significantly, drastically alter your plans. Does it make it more strategic in you having to account for those and you can utilize them to your best advantage? Or does it sort of, you fall on the side of the fence where it saps a little bit of your fun because you just wanted to do your thing without having something always potentially interfering one way or the other, however it's going to help you or hinder you? So what do I think? So final thoughts here on this. Now, it has a 4-player free-for-all. Up to 4 players can do free-for-all. You can also play 2 versus 2 teams. 4-player free-for-all is going to be a little bit of a more ability-driven, chaotic King of Tokyo minus the dice. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I say that as a matter of fact. The benefit, the reason you may find that acceptable at the 3 or 4 player counts, is because you're only getting 2 actions per round before the round ends, and the turn order potentially changes. Because the turn order at the end of every round is based on who has the most energy. So if you have the more energy than someone else, it's going to rocket you up that. The other blessing curse of this is there's only 7 rounds. So there's only 14 actions that you're taking total. So in order to get some of these knockdowns, you're going to have to play rather aggressive because it's not a long game. Again, combined with the lesser overhead means it's going to get easier to the table than something heavier weight. Because I have plenty of heavier weight skirmish games that are hard to get. I'm looking at you, Mythic Battles Pantheon, that I can't get to the table anywhere near as much as I would dream of. And this is going to be more akin to something like a lighter Super Fantasy Brawl in that sense, and easier to get to the table than even that. Something a little bit more simplistic in terms of some of the tactics, but very akin in a slightly different way to another highly, highly underrated, amazing game, Battle for Baturnia. And I can see people liking that. I can see it also, you know, especially with the free-for-all, turning into a pylon. And that's, again, what people don't like about King of Tokyo, right? Now, there is the 2 versus 2 team battle. I haven't done that, so I can't comment on that. But it would probably be, I would argue, probably a preferred mode than the 4-player free-for-all for me. Now, again, the ganging up, even in the 4-player free-for-all, is going to be less. Because, like I said, everyone's only having 2 actions, so you're going to have more control. And if you get knocked out, you're immediately back in on your next turn. So there's no downtime. It's purely the number of people you knock out. So you could also have kill stealing at that higher free-for-all, which, again, you know, if you just want to have fun for it, but if you really want to play, you know, hardcore cutthroat, might want to rethink things depending on your group. But as a lighter style skirmish game with doing something unique, because that's the other aspect when I talk about all these games, especially on the crowdfunding side of things. Why am I putting this in my collection? I haven't really seen this matchup of knockout, respawn, card, upgradable mechanic combinations. It's just whether or not it's right for you. And again, going back to my beginning comparison, is it reminds me of Dice Throne in the sense of the characters, the asymmetry, the abilities. Only, you know what? You're not dependent on dice. You're more on a deck, which isn't even a super large deck. It's only like 18 cards. So it's not like you're never going to see what's in there and you have a deck like this and you're kind of at its whim, a la, you know, TCGs. So it is more streamlined. You know what's in there. You can start to anticipate. You can start to formulate how you want to do things. And it's really unique because you play and play. Move the cube and do an action. Play as many cards as you want. There's no limitation just based off your energy. So that was refreshing. Even though you're only getting 2 actions per turn, it still makes you feel like you're accomplishing more than what meets the eye, which is the feeling we go for in these games, right, in the first place. So there you go. Slash and spells. check it out. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, shoot me a comment below, as always. I appreciate it. If you made it this far, hit the like button. It tells YouTube to let other people know that I'm making awesome stuff and they should see and hear about it as well. Thank you, Burning Forge Games, for sending me a copy to talk to you guys about in the first place. Stay classy. I'll see you around. You better be subscribed. You know what's good for you.